So I will introduce now the Innovation Award winners, Michael Lawrence and Jamie Anderson. And they work for Rational Acoustics. It's a company that develops, distributes, and supports audio measurement software for the worldwide professional sound industry. They focus on the measurement of audio output at music events. And currently their main product is smart. I guess you have to be from Boston. I guess you have to be from Boston to say it right. But their focus goes beyond product development. They have addressed the compounding issues related to the risks of overexposure to music experienced by sound mixers, event crews, and attendees of concerts. These issues include a lack of tools for measuring sound exposure and updating data in an actionable format, lack of knowledge of the risk or fatalism toward the risk, and unregulated environment. And also there is a resistance towards the implementation of best practice guidelines. And their innovative approach, they're going to tell you all about it, addresses all these issues. They are being recognized today for being pioneers in combining products, services, and education to reach their hearing health promotion goals, for their culture of innovation and educational outreach, and for having raised the awareness of the importance of managing music exposures among music industry professionals, standard setting organizations, and the general public. So now I invite Jamie to join us. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. My screen shared? Yes? Yep. Okay, good. Hi, it's good to be here. We're actually pretty excited and honored being here. My name is Jamie Anderson. I am the president of Rational Acoustics. Like was said, we're a small software company based in New England that focuses on measurement software for the professional sound industry. I want to introduce who we are because we're kind of positioned to specifically to take on this SBL issue that Michael is going to cover in just a second, but I'll let you know who we are. The thing is that we basically, our target market are the professional sound engineers that install, tune, tour, use professional for touring, audio, live production, all that. I'm running really quickly because I'm trying to get out of the way and get Michael up here pretty quickly, so I apologize for any stumbling. The important factor here to kind of note is that when I say sound engineers, just remember we're not talking about formally educated engineers in most cases. We're not talking about engineers that went to a 4-year school for mechanical or electrical engineering. Most of the engineers, while they're incredibly good problem solvers, technical problem solvers, were mostly educated in the process of the job and educated by other engineers, and it wasn't really a formalized educational process. And so that becomes an issue. So who we are, our product is called SMART. It's just dual channel FFT based analysis software. The issue about this, and when we formed our company, the slide before was just pictures of analyzers, but the big thing when we formed Rational Acoustics, it wasn't just about making the analyzer, but it was about making the support network and the training network and able to support it. The basic problem, I just need to move this right here. The basic issue for bringing dual channel FFT into the pro audio market was first that the analyzers weren't available. Nobody could get their hands on them. They were really expensive for the market. More so, sound engineers didn't understand the technology. There were no educational materials that were really written for professional sound engineers. It was more for formal engineering. And as a result, these types of analyzers were not embraced in professional sound engineering. In fact, there were a lot of engineers that actively feared them because they didn't understand them. And the processes for using these analyzers was not really optimized for the flow of a live sound event. So for Rational Acoustics, what we had to do is to solve this issue or to address this issue, for equipment, of course, it's software, so that brings down the burden of entry, the price of entry pretty quickly and makes it readily available to people. But we've spent the last 25 years working on developing training courses throughout the world and educational materials that are specifically written for a typical sound engineer, not math heavy or anything like that that scares most non-engineers. And so I've got a missing slide here. That's okay. So what we've done is we've built training courses for this type of measurement for professional audio and instructors. The whole point here is we started with a technology that most people didn't understand or trust, and we made it affordable and available, being software. The cool thing about it being software was that software in itself is readily adapted and easily developed. So as we came up with processes for using this technology, one of the reasons why this technology was not accepted was because it was developed for industrial use and applications and not for live sound engineering. And so we adapted the tool for the application, and therefore it started fitting the workflows and started to be acceptable. And now this type of measurement is common in live sound engineering. The reason why I bring this up, and I'm sorry for dashing through this so quickly, the reason why I brought this up is we are kind of uniquely positioned for doing education. A lot of while we develop software, a lot of our efforts are focused on education, particularly for live sound engineers. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out of the way and hand this over to Michael. Michael is our product manager for SPL and a senior instructor with Rational Acoustics, and he can probably clean up the mess that I just made. But just let you know, if you're at a live sound event, a rock concert or something like that, and you see the mix position, you go up there, that's where you'll probably see our equipment. So let me get out of the way.
Thanks, Jamie.
Sorry.
So I think, the point that Jamie's making is that we are really in a unique position to address this issue. The issue is that, if you work in a live production environment, live sound mixers, the people who go to the shows, the artists, the staff, the crew, these people are routinely exposed to damaging sound levels. And now this isn't a secret. You can go back, decades in the literature and find people raising concern about this, but I like to kind of compare it to smoking in the 50s. We've now amassed enough information on this that we can't pretend it's not an issue anymore. We know that it's a problem. And so how do we address this? Part of the problem, and I think this is an important consideration, modern sound systems have enough power to hurt people's hearing, and there's a legitimate technical reason for that. We don't just need to produce the average level of the signal, we need to really produce the entire waveform that includes the peaks. That's the stuff that makes the music sound like the music. So as an analogy, your car can probably hit 85 or 90 miles per hour, even though it's not safe to drive that fast all the time. We need that power under the hood in order to make the car behave in a way that is useful and safe to us on the road. So the shift that we need to talk about is the people who are operating these systems are operating a system that is capable of hurting people, not just ourselves, but of course we're the surrogate operators for the audience around us. And so there's an ethical professional responsibility there not to hurt the people around us. And it's sort of compounded by the fact, as Jamie pointed out, that most people who mix live concerts for a living don't have formal training. They're not formal engineers, they're not audiologists. And until very recently, there was very little fact-based resources really dedicated at our industry and people in this position. And not to say that there isn't information on sound exposure. Of course, you all know better than I do that there's a lot of information on sound exposure, but the question is, how do you package that in a way that is accessible and meaningful to someone who mixes live sound and doesn't have a background in audiology? And sort of as an extension of that problem, particularly here in the United States where we are based, there is virtually no regulation of this. So there's no regulation to what you can expose people to at a concert. So we're basically sort of everyone's acting sort of out of their own personal responsibility right now. And obviously that's not an optimal situation. So one of the things that we are dealing with is availability of tools. I mean, we're still largely operating in the world where people take either an iPhone or an iWatch or a Radio Shack Party Favor SPL meter, and that is what people think of in the live sound industry when we talk about measurement tools. And obviously that's not going to get us where we need to go to generate useful and actionable information about sound exposure. Besides the tools, people that mix live concerts typically don't understand enough about sound level measurement, the mechanisms of hearing damage, loudness versus level, those things, to use those tools effectively. And of course, the audience members don't either. There's sort of an implicit understanding on part of the audience that when they go to a show, no one's going to hurt them. They trust that the rigging's not going to fall, and they trust that the electrical and the pyro is done safely, and that applies to audio as well. So we do have an issue of informed consent here, that we are sort of the custodians for the people that are attending the show. And culturally, there was an issue too. I mean, all of us that work in live production have heard the phrase, if it's too loud, you're too old. Now, thankfully, we are moving away from that, and that is something that we're trying to accelerate and really push forward. But as Thais kind of mentioned at the beginning, there was for a while, and still to some degree, this idea that it's, if you think it's too loud, it's a sign of weakness, and there's my PA can go louder than your PA. And although that is dying, that is still a cultural reality that we do need to deal with. And the regulations that are sort of starting to trickle down and become used, a lot of them are written by people who don't understand sound level measurement and don't understand audiology and don't understand the mechanics involved. And so they end up being very restrictive and not actionable or not realistic. So they're not solving the problem that they were intended to solve. So we have a really big mess of a problem here. The cool thing for us is that we already have a tool that is in common use at the control position for a concert sound rig. So this was not about trying to pitch the industry on a new thing that we created. We are already in those situations. They are already using our equipment. They are already looking to us for training, for education. So a real natural move for us was to expand that software to include more SPL measurement toolset. So one of the things that we did was we added the ability to directly measure both NIOSH and OSHA exposure dose right in the software. We can do it in real time, and it's enabled by default. So as soon as you open this software up and you start looking at SPL values in your software, you are generating that exposure data. So you don't have to do anything. We're putting it right in front of you. We have done a lot of work with sound engineers to understand how it's helpful to display this data to them during the show. As they're making decisions in real time about the mix and how loud it should be at certain parts of the show, how can we show that information in a way that's helpful? And accountability is an issue for us as well. So we have the ability to trigger alarms. We have the ability to allow people who are off-site in other offices or even in a place that's not even the venue, management office or production trailer, to know in real time what those levels are. So now that we have the tool set in place, another part of that was teach people how to use this. So we expanded our curriculum, our documentation, our online training videos, and of course the live classes that we do to contain more information on sound level measurement, sound exposure, hearing damage. We are trying to basically find any place in our industry where that conversation is happening and be a part of that, sharing our materials with our network of trainers around the world. So anyone around the world that goes to take a smart training class, they're going to be exposed to this information as well. So we're just sort of creating a dialogue about this in places that the dialogue wasn't happening. And the third part of that is try to change the culture around this. We do workshops where we invite industry professionals, people who are recognized as successful mix engineers, and we talk about how to use these tools and how to understand how the human hearing mechanism perceives loudness. And then we talk to those mix engineers about these things and how they approach these things in their mix. And so what we see is, hey, it's not just us telling people to turn down. We're really talking about developing a culture where, hey, this is cool. This is a cool thing to do. And the people who are at the top of this industry and are doing this successfully, they're paying attention to this too. So don't you want to be a part of that dialogue? And that extends to non-technical stakeholders, for example, in the house of worship, the pastor often has to make the decision on loudness. So we want to have materials for that pastor to be able to read and understand how to implement sound level measurement that's going to be useful and productive. So, you know, we're not just benefiting the mix engineers, but also all the other event staff and crew that do this, you know, 4 or 5 nights a week. I'm talking to you from a tour bus right now. We're in the middle of a 4-day show run. And so this is the reality for people who do this for a living. This is your night every night. So although, of course, we care about the audience, the people who do this every night are far more likely to run into an issue first. And so we need to talk about that. And of course, keeping the artists' hearing protected so they can continue to have good careers and continue to make music that keeps us all employed and keeps the concerts happening. So that's sort of where we're coming from with the SPL additions to Smart. This is just a view of what the software looks like. You can see here on our meters, these are our non-OSHA and OSHA exposure dosimeters that, again, can be displayed to an engineer in real time. And we can log this data and we can recall it later, and we can share that information remotely over a network, and we can send a PDF report to anyone that band management. This is a look at our remote monitoring interface. This is just a web browser. You could pull this up on your smartphone or your iPad or any computer on the network or anywhere in the world if you set up your network configuration properly, and be able to see in real time what those levels are, what the trend is. What we're talking about is accountability, keeping everybody on the same page. Really, no one's hoarding that data, and we're not trying to hide what the levels are. We're able to have a conversation about that. It's just a brief example. This is a couple of photos from Outside Lands Festival that we did this previous October out in San Francisco. And we had 5 stages. There were, I think, something like 200,000 people coming through this festival over the course of 3 days. And it was very important to management and the city and everybody involved that not only were we not creating a nuisance noise issue for the people near the event, but of course, the people at the event were not being exposed to dangerous sound levels. So we were able to deploy these screens running Smart at every stage. And so the mix engineers had a big meter in front of them. And the shot on the right here is of the production trailer, where they were able to look at what was happening at all the stages at the same time in real time. So everyone is on the same page and everyone's playing by the same rule book. So you can't have one engineer that comes out and cranks it up and ruins it for everybody. A big part of this has been outreach for us. Talking at industry events, trade shows like NAMM, which is the National Association of Music Merchants, the Event Safety Alliance. We did a talk 2 years ago about this, and really trying to educate mix engineers, the people who are the decision makers, the boots on the ground, who are in charge of how loud shows are, giving them techniques to make their mix full and dynamic and impactful, but managing the exposure and reducing it. And as all of you know better than I do, even a couple dB of reduction brings you a lot of savings in terms of exposure, and so it becomes a much safer situation for everybody. Part of my work has been doing some research with a couple of other folks from other audio-based manufacturers throughout the industry, including some loudspeaker manufacturers, on sort of sound level measurement in the industry and how that's trending, and trying to get more people on board with that. We're looking at an industry-wide certification, just trying to understand the issue more. And as Thais mentioned, there's a World Health Organization standard coming out next month. And some of the papers that I contributed to with my group of SPL nerd friends were used to inform the decisions that the World Health Organization has arrived at for that standard. So we're basically trying to create a more informed dialogue about this issue. And kind of, really the future is that we want to continue to make this tool easy to use. We want to make it accessible. We want to make it something that people choose to use, not just use because they're required to by a law or regulation. We want to make it part of best practice as a live sound engineer to keep an eye on your levels and keep an eye on your exposure, and increase not only the accessibility to our tool, but information about that. At the end of the day, whether or not you choose to use our tool or someone else's, we want people to understand this issue and to make educated decisions about it. And, it's kind of our feeling that the more common this stuff is, the more ubiquitous SPL monitoring becomes in a concert environment. That's a win for everybody. So to kind of wrap up, I think the biggest challenge for me, and Thais and I have exchanged a bunch of emails about this as well, is we needed to not only understand this issue, again, we're not trained audiologists, figure out how to package it and explain it to people who don't have a background in audiology and don't have a background in formal engineering. So can we create these resources that are accessible and approachable to people who are working sound engineers? And really helping people understand the tool, because if they don't understand how to use it, it's not going to be valuable to them. So that's that's really where our focus has been. We're super honored to receive this award. It definitely helps our credibility, and it definitely positions us as more of an industry authority, and sort of kind of gives us a little bit of a voice to say, hey, this is something that we think is really important, and you should think it's important too, and we can have a good dialogue about that, and just increasing awareness about what we're doing and giving us more opportunities to start that dialogue. So hopefully we didn't go too far over on the time. And this is the contact information for Jamie and myself. We really hope that you've enjoyed our little presentation today. It's been really a big honor to be here. I want to say thank you to everyone with Safe and Sound for this honor. It's really cool. And please do reach out and get in touch if you're interested in what we're talking about. We'd love to talk with you further. Thanks very much.